that's the actual message that we're going to be sharing here today and going into this sermon series that's called War Room. And so, how many of you have ever seen that movie, War Room? That was an awesome movie. I would recommend it. It's an awesome movie. The premise of the whole movie is what I actually want. I mean, I was inspired when I saw the movie, and so I was thinking about doing a series on spiritual warfare, and that's where we're coming. But the whole premise of the movie is that the main character, the lady who starts discipling another lady in the movie, and I won't do any spoiler alerts, but she opens up with a statement that says basically every war that is fought or won, that it isn't fought and won on the battlefield. It's strategically planned in a war room. There are people, before you even go into any battle, there's strategists that are going on, and it's the same thing. Why should it be any less with our spiritual battle? Today, there's a lot of times I try to memorize sermons, but today there's actually so much rich stuff that I'm actually going to do quite a bit of reading off of my page here, just as a forewarning, and to give you a little bit of a hope right now. It is 11:15. We're going to be out of here by 11:45. So I know some of you guys are hungry and thinking about burritos and somewhere around there, and I might go, sometimes the landing takes 5 or so minutes extra, but just to give you hope, sometimes you're sitting there going, man, when's this guy going to be done? I'm giving you hope up in the beginning, because we don't think that it takes too awful long to communicate the truth. But so in this major thought of every battle or war that's fought, not just being fought on the battlefield, but planned and executed and strategized in a war room, Sun Tzu said this. He's the one who wrote this isn't on, hold on. Can you plug that in, son? Actually unplug it and plug it back in. All right. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, by the way, today. That's why the words weren't coming up. The computer's been freezing, and so hopefully this will work. So Sun Tzu, The Art of War, he says this, that every battle is won before it's fought, right? And that's the truth. It doesn't matter so much what happens, the strength of the warriors. It's all about strategy. If you've ever watched Braveheart or any of these movies that is about any kind of military campaign, you'll see that it's executed in the planning stages. The strategies and formations, they're age old. The military commanders have been doing war and making battle for eons, since man has really been on the earth. Nimrod was the first warrior in Genesis 6, right? He started forming cities, and since that time, you can bet your bottom dollar that you don't just go out to your enemy, just say, I hope we win. We got big, strong guys, right? It's the same thing in our spiritual fight. Without a strategy, we're not going to prevail. Even though Jesus has already won the fight, if we personally don't go into our time of spiritual war with a plan, we can be guaranteed that we'll succeed at failing, right? So a military, and I just wanted to add this, a military strategic planning or war room is located in a central place for carrying out orders and supervising tasks, also known as headquarters. The command center is where generals, strategists, and operation experts make tactical decisions and implement plans of battle execution based on the best available intelligence of our enemy's position, his perceived plans, and his goals. Does that make sense? I mean, that's the way it is out on any battlefield. When they're getting trained and going through boot camp, you're not learning about all that. You're learning how to dismantle your gun and how to do hand-to-hand combat. But really, you're just a pawn, right? I mean, the people who are fighting the battles are pawns. They go out and carry out commands that were done at a higher level. And it's the same thing in spiritual warfare. We have a commander-in-chief, Jesus, right? And if we're following his orders and his directions, we're going to see victories. He's already given us the victory, but we'll talk about that in a second. So there are two general activities that happen in command centers. Number one is communications and intelligence gathering, right? Any spiritual war, we need this. We need to gather. That's why we're preaching this series here today. And this message is really just a foundation for the really good services that are going to come. The next 4 messages, this sets the stage to get the concepts for what we're going to be teaching on. But we've got to be able to communicate and gather intelligence if we're going to see the victory. Field situation or progress reports, sit reps is what they call them, right? They take incoming information right? I mean, you've seen those strategy rooms or war rooms in movies and so on and so forth. They're filled with communications devices, walkie-talkies, and they've got aerials and, all their radars, and they're trying to make the best use of information that's happening so that they can not only, respond to the enemy, because we don't want to come from that place where we're just responding to the arrows that are always constantly at us. You can't win a fight like that. You've got to get out ahead of your enemy, and you've got to make decisions based on what's the best known information that's out there. And you can bet your bottom dollar that not only should we be doing it, but our enemy is doing that. The enemy has been studying mankind, not only your family and the things that make you tick. He's been studying mankind as long as man has been on this earth. And he's gathering information and intelligence so that he can formulate an attack against you. The other thing that happens in a command center is strategic mobilization of troops and resources. And this is so important for us to get and grasp a hold of. Our enemy he's mobilizing forces. It's not just the devil comes against you. It's not just Satan, in a red cape and a tail and horns that wants to take you and your family out. He's got myriads of angels on his side. But as Christians, we need to take the same similar approach. I can't fight this fight alone. That's why Hebrews 10:25 says that we should not forsake the assembly together. And why Jesus said, where two or more are gathered together in my name, I'll be there in the midst. You see, we need each other. We're better together. We can't do this alone. And if we're going to organize and if we're going to strategically mobilize, it's going to take some forethought. It's going to take some of us really thinking out the spiritual war that is against our families, against our community, and getting together on the same page about it. We're better together. We'll make a better difference together. Wars aren't always won from responding to the enemy in defensive mode, but victory is gaining superiority by staying ahead and strategically. Look at this here. 2 Corinthians says this. 2 Corinthians 2:11 says, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. So when Paul told the Corinthian church this way, he's saying that, listen, we have a general idea about how Satan, we don't want to let him outwit us. And I'm going to go more into this in another message, but this is the foundation for what I want to talk about here today. As we gather intelligence, I want to understand our position, and I want us to understand our enemy here in this place. I can't be exhaustive in one message in 30 minutes, but I do want to arm you and get you the general idea so that you're not going at this unawares, because the Bible says that we are not unaware of his schemes, right? Schemes in the Greek is this. The Greek is noema. It is a schematic, a blueprint, or a design, a mental thought, perception, or evil plans is the definition of this in the Greek. And so it says again in Ephesians 6, right, that our enemy schemes, that he's got a plan of attack. We're not unaware of his schemes, but he's got designs and blueprints that he's been working on, not only for you individually and your family, but for our church, the community that we are in, and he's organized. Schemes on the Webster Dictionary says this: it's a large-scale systematic plan or arrangement for attaining some particular object or objective and putting a particular idea into effect. How many of you know that our enemy is not stupid? I mean, he knows how we tick. He knows what buttons to push. He is against us in a major way. But greater is he who is in us than he that's in the world. I don't want to scare anybody here today. We're fighting from a place of victory, but we still need to be armed so that we're working together so we can accomplish the victory together. That's why we need each other so much. That's Romans 8:31, right, that says that. But look at this here. Our God is a warrior. Some of you might be asking, like, well, why this spiritual warfare in the first place? Why is it that we're in this? Our God is a warrior. The Lord is his name. And not only is he a warrior, he teaches his children for war. That's something that's been around from the beginning. Our God trains us for this. You see, he could have thrown the enemy into the pit as soon as Adam and Eve sinned and he deceived them. He could have just said, oh no, you go to hell right now. But he didn't. Our God trains us. Look at this. These are the nations the Lord left to test all the Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. The 5 rulers of the Philistines and the Canaanites, the Sidonians, the Hivites living in the Lebanon mountains, from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath, they were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands, which he had given their forefathers through Moses. You see, every spiritual fight that happens in the Old Testament as Israel was going into the promised land, as they were going in to inhabit the land that was filled with giants because the sin of the Amorites reached its full measure, because the angelic race had come down and defiled themselves with the daughters of men and made giants before the flood, they're giants after the flood too. And God left some of these. As they went into this area, they went in and completely annihilated, were supposed to completely annihilate all of these nations that were left there. And we don't always think about it, but our battle isn't against flesh and blood. Our battle has never been against flesh and blood. There is a liar, a cheater, a deceiver that's been here from the beginning. And in all of these here narratives, this historical account of what Israel went through to go into their promised land, there's always a devil behind every single one of these nations. There are systematic forces that were happening, but it spun out of control, and so God had to take care of it in the physical too, because he can't let giants, half angel, who are the heroes of renown, come onto this earth and mess with people. Read the book of Revelations. They get released again, some of these angels. We've been studying that. It's terrifying. But God, he leaves some of these nations. He could have gone in and said, let's let Joshua just wipe them all out. They did mighty military campaigns, but they were fortified in there, and God allowed them to test the people's heart and to train them for war. God wants to teach you how to fight. It's not enough to just believe on Jesus' name. That's enough to get you to heaven. But if that was all that it was about, is getting you to heaven, you would have accepted Jesus into your heart and said, Lord, come into my heart, and you would have just died. Bam, right there. Why? You go home. It's time to go home. No, but he left us here to enforce what Jesus, when he said it is finished, it was finished experientially, positionally, and we have to work it out experientially and fight the fight. We've got an enemy here that hates humanity, and so he is teaching us war. Very important concept for us to get, because, our God is big enough. It's not a real arm, battle against God and the devil. Let me just say that right now. This battle that we're in, it's not against God and the devil, because God is just almighty. He could just go, there may be a strong devil, but he's God's devil. He can't do anything that God hasn't allowed him to do. Consider Job. In Job chapter, the first 3 verses, it talks about how Satan wanted to snuff out this guy Job. And the Lord is the one who suggested Job. Well, how about my servant Job? He allowed him to go through all this. Satan had been going through the whole earth, and he was only allowed so much authority, but he wasn't allowed to kill him. And the things that Job went through serve as an example for us. We're in this world to fight a fight that God could win at any second. And he already won through his son positionally. And so let's start off this series with that truth. You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free, right? Sometimes we go through things, though. Our family starts experiencing massive warfare, and we think if we could just shrink back, maybe I won't be such a target. Don't deceive yourself. The Lord trains his children for war. Yeah, do you ever wonder why God allowed mankind to go through trials and temptations and warfare? If you sit back and think of it, either God is God of all or God ain't God at all, right? And so in our human minds, we're like, well, why am I going through this temptation? Why is the Lord allowing that person to come into my life and trash my life or to tempt me away from the things of God? He wants to test our hearts to see if we're really going to follow him. He never wanted puppets. But God's plan for mankind always included warfare. He foreknew the entire plan of the human angelic history, from Satan's fall to our fall, and the whole plan of redemption and the ultimate consummation of the ages. He wrote out the whole Bible before it began. Before human ever hit here, before our great grandparents, Adam and Eve, because we're all related to them. Before they ever took a step, the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the earth, it says in Revelations. So he always had a plan. But he placed man in the very place that he cast the enemy down to in Genesis, right? Isn't that what he said? That he cast Satan out of heaven, and where did he put him? In the garden. And where did he put man? In the garden. And then all the temptation starts. If God never planned us for war, then he would have cast them to some other planet or into the pit of hell. But it's so important here. Jesus saw him fall like lightning, and Revelations that we just read in our home group in chapter 12 says, woe to the earth because the devil has been hurled down to you, and he's full of wrath because he knows his time is short. So why is God putting him here in the first place? To train us. He's a God of war, and he wants his children to know how to fight a fight. I'll never forget. I remember one time I was on my way to this. We live back east, and there was this kid who was bullying me. I mean, I was kind of a shrimp, when I was like 5 and 6 years old. And I went to the bus stop. We would walk about a half a mile, Langham Drive in rural Pennsylvania, and the bus would come by and pick us up. And there's this one kid. He would push me every single day and call me names and everything else. And I came home one day after school. And, I'm kind of a soft-hearted guy. I wasn't that so much in high school. I think it's because of this moment, if I trace it all back. But my mom said, he's doing what to you? I want you to go out right now, and you march over to his house, ask him to come outside, and you pop him right in the nose. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to hit anybody. And she's like, you're not coming back in this house until you go pop him in the nose. And listen, my mom's not a violent person, but she knew the principle. Like, if you go and you punch the biggest guy that's in the room, and they're bullying you, they'll leave you alone. You'll end up being friends afterwards. So I did it, full of fear, shaking, walking down to the guy's house, and this guy's like way bigger than me, right? I walked out, and I said, and he even looked at me like, what do you want, you little shrimp? And I was like, hey, can you come out? And he's like, yeah. And I just went, pow! Little kid, and then I ran. But guess what? Next day, some of you guys have done that. Some of you have been there. Like when you're still young and tender and you don't want to do any of that stuff, but life comes at you. The next day he totally treated me different. It's like if this little shrimp is going to step up and knock, me for a loop, then I'm not going to mess with him anymore. And that set something in motion in me. I wasn't going to be bullied anymore. But that's what our God does. He doesn't want you to walk around bullied. He doesn't want you to walk around in defeat and all messed up all the time. He wants you to take off the gloves and give the devil a black eye. When we came to plant this church, we were meeting with our church planting directors, and he was like, so what is the reason that you want to go start a new church? And I just said, I want to give the devil a black eye. He robbed and stole and killed for my family and led me down a dark path of addiction and everything else, and I don't want to see him succeed and take other families. And so I'm in this just to give him a black eye. Huh? And that's the way we need to be too. We need to get that mentality that I'm not just fighting like so I can keep my head above water. No, we're going to eliminate the bully and take him down. No, Sun Tzu says, know thy enemy and know thyself. Art of War. This guy was strategists and business leaders, they read The Art of War because there was strategic thought that was happening here. This is the first key. Like, if you're looking at false religions, it's like the rule of counterfeit. You don't have to study the wrong thing. You don't have to study the counterfeit so you can identify every counterfeit. No, you study the genuine thing, right? But in spiritual war, we do have to know our enemies. The Bible said in 2 Corinthians 2 that we're not unaware of his schemes. And the Bible is very clear about how he operates and gives us enough to go on so that we can be informed and so that we can fight the fight that's ahead of us. But our enemy and his reality is the very first thing. Actually, the world's view of Satan, of the deceiver, is this: that he's just a representation of evil in the world. That it's not an actual figure. If you talk to 100 different people about whether Satan exists or not, you're going to get 100 different answers. But the Bible's very clear about his reality. He's not just a representation of evil in the world or darkness in the heart of man. He's a person, a very real person who fell from heaven, as outlined in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 37. And you can equip yourselves by knowing he's not a fairy tale or a myth. Number two. And number three is that he's not a character that Christians just made up to be a crutch, to make an excuse like, oh, the devil made me do it. Huh? There's a whole period in Revelations when we're talking about eschatology or the end of times. It's called the 1,000 years or the millennial reign. And people go crazy even when the devil's locked up in the pit of hell. There is no deception going on from the enemy. And so it's not just that oh, the devil made me do it. That's what that answers. The 1,000-year reign means that people left to their own are going to make bad decisions anyway. And we can't claim that it's just the enemy. So these things, but this is the world's view. But he's a very real person. Charles Baudelaire said this, Baudelaire, he said this, that one of the greatest weapons is one of his greatest weapons is making the world believe that he doesn't exist. That is Satan's primary tactic. He wants to make you believe that he doesn't exist, that it's just a fairy tale, that there's just some other kind of story going on that's just a myth or one of these other things. That's his greatest weapon. He will not show himself unless it's absolutely necessary, because he knows that will cause your faith to expand just as much as seeing an angel or a miracle or anything, because you can't unsee that stuff. And so he stays in the shadows and he whispers that in mankind's ears. Huh? Let's look at his names and titles, because that says a lot about who he is. Before the fall, in Isaiah 14:12, it says that he was Lucifer, the bright and morning star. The Bible says that he also appears as an angel of light. And so before the fall, this is who he is, the light bearer. And you can, if you're taking notes, and by the way, those who take notes, the percentage goes up of people who go to heaven who take notes. I'm just kidding. I just made up that statistic. Come on, somebody. But Ezekiel 37 says that he was created perfect in beauty and wisdom, this Lucifer, and he was the worship leader in heaven. He had a function in God's original design. He was created to cover and overextend his wings over the glory of God, but his heart was filled with pride, if we read Isaiah 14, and he was cast down. He was created perfect, and pride entered his heart, and he was cast down to earth. So before the fall, his name was Lucifer. After the fall, we know him as this. In 1 Peter 5:8 says that his name is Satan, which means adversary. Simple enough, he is our adversary. Right? You can look at that 1 Peter 5:8. Satan walks around like a roaring, seeking who he can devour. It's in Job, it's in Zechariah 3:1. Satan, though. Also, he's called the devil. In Revelations 20, verse 2. That means devil in the original Greek means a slanderer or accuser. He's called the accuser of the brethren. That's what he does. That's one of his tools and methods of operation. In order for us to stand and fight against some of these things, we have to look at his names. The third one is his serpent. 2 Corinthians 11:3 said, hey, Paul was concerned that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent, he was afraid that the believers' minds would somehow be led astray from pure devotion to Christ by this serpent. Also, he's called the dragon in Revelations 20, verse 2. Huh? A dragon, Beelzebub or Beelzebul. You can see that all through the scriptures. Matthew 10:25 says that he's the prince of demons, and that means the prince of the dunghill, the lord of flies, or the lord of disease. So where does infirmity come from and sickness come from? It doesn't come from God. Why is God allowing my family to go through this cancer? Beelzebul, the lord of the dunghill. He's at the wrong in it all. But we've got to learn how to fight our battles. The Lord fights our battles, but we've got to understand what we're up against. Belial, Deuteronomy 13:13, it means good for nothing. That's who he is, good for nothing. Huh? Prince of the world, John 12:31. It says that he's the tempter in Matthew 4:3. He led Jesus out into the wilderness. The Holy Spirit led him out in the wilderness to be tempted by the enemy. But he is a tempter. Know this, and for sure, if you are standing for God, temptation is going to come your way. You are going to face diseases. You're going to face these things. You're going to face the dragon. It also says that he's the prince of the power of the air. Ephesians 2:2, that means his capital is set up in the heavenlies above where we're at right now. He's got a different perspective than we do. We need to understand this if we're going to fight effectively against him. Also, he's the God of this world. How did he get that title? By mankind sinning and handing it over to him. Here you go. By falling to his temptations, by eating of that fruit there in the garden. The Bible says that he's a deceiver in Revelations 20:10, that he's the accuser of the brethren. Revelations 12:10, Zechariah 3:1, he stood and accused. In Job, that's what he did. He just stood there and accused Job to God. That's what he's going to do to us in the very end, and why we have Jesus Christ. He's our mediator and our high priest who stands and says, no, my blood has already paid the price for them. He's also shown as the angel of light in 2 Corinthians 11:4, if you were wondering where that was found. He's also a murderer from the beginning, the father of lies, a roaring lion, and a destroyer. And those, you have all and you'll be able to look at this on our YouTube channel afterwards if you're not taking notes. But his forces, his organizations, that he is highly ranked. It says in Revelations that a third of the angels, Revelation chapter 12 says a third of the angels were swept down to the earth, or the third of the stars were swept down to the earth with him. So he does have an army. And myriads means millions upon millions. It means that there's enough fallen angels to organize over cities, over families, and even over individuals, especially those who are a threat. And so we have to understand this, that we're not just fighting the guy in the big red tights, that it's a whole army, a myriad of them, and they're highly organized, set up in divisions. Ephesians chapter 6 says this, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So a third of the angels. The book of Daniel in chapter 10, it talks about how God wanted to get a message to one of his servants, to Daniel. And there, while he was standing on the side of a river, there was the messenger, Gabriel, the archangel, was trying to get a message from God to Daniel over his people because they were in exile. And then it goes off and it slips into a little bit of a narrative, and it says that this angel told him about a heavenly battle that had happened. It says, for 21 days I was resisted by the prince of Persia. And it's not talking about a physical prince. A physical prince can't hold back an angel. There was an organization that was over Persia where they were at, that was trying to withhold and was doing warfare against God's heavenly angel that was trying to bring this message to Daniel concerning his people. And so know and understand this, that this isn't just something that you know, it happens every morning. Okay, well, let's see, I wonder who I'm going to attack today. Oh no, it's all planned out. God, already knows there's, not only are there forces against us, there are greater forces with us. And we'll talk about that in another message. But I'm almost done here, giving you hope here. But our enemy has a mission. It says in John 10:10 that his whole method of operation, his modus operandi, is that he came to steal, kill, and destroy. Every single one of his activities or strategic goals can be organized or categorized into one of these three aims. Jesus himself pointed this out. If it's not killing and destroying, it's stealing from your family and from your life. But he came to accuse God and slander God's people. That is fit right in there under stealing, killing, and destroying. He came to lie and deceive us away. That fits right into those three aims. But really, what does that do? He tries to hurt God by hurting God's children. You see, he doesn't fight fair. God could wipe him right off the map at any single time. He knows he's not strong enough to defeat Abba Father, Papa God. He's not strong enough. There's no way that he could ever battle against even one of the least of the angels in heaven. There's no way he can win or overthrow. So what does he do? Just like a bully, he comes after the weak one, after our children, after our families, after the people who are weak in our community, who are left open for attack because they don't have a relationship with Jesus. He doesn't fight fair. He wants to hurt God by hurting us. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Every time we see a drug addict, every time we see somebody who's homeless on the street, he's hurt. It's him hurting God's heart by keeping this formulation, this stronghold over their life, and he keeps pelting them, and it breaks God's heart. And it says in Romans chapter 8 that all creation is groaning, crying out for the sons of God to be revealed. So right now, that is our chief aim, is to be used by instruments of God to see people set free. That's why most parables of Jesus always revolve around healing and helping broken, hurting people. Because God, he hurts when we hurt. And so he's sending us. He's trained his children how to fight. And the last thing is this. It's to render God, his aim by stealing, killing, and destroying and aiming his fiery darts at his enemies, he wants to render us ineffective. He wants to tempt us away from God's perfect plan for our life so that we can just be over here on the shelf, sitting in condemnation. Woe is me, I'm never going to be good enough. But you see, knowing this from the onset means that we can organize, that we can strategize, that we can band together and encourage each other as we see the day approaching, that we can come against these aims and become effective. We can become productive, the Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 2. Or 2 Peter chapter 1, that we can keep ourselves from stumbling by hanging on to each other, by encouraging each other, not letting the enemy lie and steal and kill and destroy. The enemy's names, though, reveal his character and his objectives. Jesus said he was a murderer and a liar from the beginning. He's the father of all lies. And that's where, you know what, primarily, and we talked about this in our Breaking Bad series, that really the strongholds, the war happens here. It happens in our hearts and here. I mean, yes, sometimes he shows up and he throws fiery darts of infirmity at us. But most of the time the battle is here. The enemy starts lying to us on Sunday morning. No, I'm not going to go over there. They don't love me. They don't like me. Nobody even said hi to me last week on Easter Sunday. I can't even believe that. I walked in there and I came and sat down and not one single person said hi. That happens. And the enemy's just sitting there lying and making us fight this own battle, but it's all up here. Because the truth is that we do love you and we do want to try to make it to every single person to say, hey, and what's up? Right? Isn't that true? If anybody knows me, man, I'll go like cut somebody else off. Hold on, I got to get that guy before he hits the door. But the enemy's just sitting here lying, going, no. I'm going to cut this off and render him ineffective, render him from getting the help, rendering him from getting plugged in and learning all about what he needs to so he can fight the fight. So I want to talk about 3 common mistakes and we're done here. Number 1 is blaming him for everything. We can get into that habit of blaming the devil for everything. Oh, the devil made me do it. Hello, watch this. So this is the priest, he's coming in, gonna do his little salami bologna tutti frutti over the room. Looks like a scene out of Exorcist right here. Scary, huh? See, sometimes we blame everything on the devil, but there's just a strong vacuum cleaner upstairs. You're like, man, that's the devil up there, man. He's like making that girl up there, it's just a vacuum cleaner. Sometimes there's a natural excuse for things. Sometimes, one of the common mistakes is we blame everything on the devil. And he's not behind everything. Sometimes it's us just making mistakes and reaping the consequences. But don't blame everything. Don't get into that, because that leads into number 2 is provoking battles that we shouldn't be provoking. Jude verse 9 says this. So that was supposed to, hold on. That was supposed to go with the first one, Isaiah 14. This talks about the devil in Isaiah 14. Those who see you and stare at you, this is after the judgment, they ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth? You see, in our minds, we get this big puffed idea that like this devil, like he's just all powerful and almighty, and he's like in beast mode all the time. We're going to look at him at the very end and say, that's the guy? He's the one who shook the nations? We shouldn't ascribe to him too much credit, but we also shouldn't do this. We shouldn't provoke unnecessary battles. Jude verse 9 and 10 says, But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, didn't dare bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, The Lord rebuke you. Yet these things men speak abusively against, whatever they do not understand. And what things they don't understand by instinct, like unreasoning animals, these are the very things that destroy them. We shouldn't ascribe him too much credit, but we don't want to go around pushing battles and seeing a demon behind every single thing and saying, Lion, devil, I bind you in the name of Jesus, when he has got nothing to do with it. You see, even the angels, they didn't dare bring a slanderous accusation. And when we ascribe things that aren't true, it's like going into a bully's house like I did when I was a little kid. Now, he had it coming. But sometimes it'd be like going into a bully's house when he never even messed with us and starting to say, you're a bully and I'm going to pick a fight with you. The devil's a bully. Do we need to go and pick a fight with him every time? How many good Christians have been shipwrecked and had their faith and all of hell attacking against them because they're going out trying to fight battles that God hasn't told them to fight? You see, in this spiritual war that we're in, it's so important. God is our command center. He is our war room. We need to sit and listen to him, and he'll show us what battles to fight. There may be times that you've got to call out the devil, and you've got to unleash the spiritual forces of heaven against him, and you've got to stand with the authority that he gave you, the keys of the kingdom, to bind on earth what will be bound in the heavens. We have that, but it doesn't mean that we need to provoke unnecessarily. Every time our family comes, is under attack, we don't need to bind the devil. Sometimes it's as simple as pray for healing. Hello? We don't want to make that mistake. The last mistake is underestimating him. We don't want to underestimate him. We don't want to provoke him. We don't also want to blame him for everything. It kind of all goes together, doesn't it? It's really just kind of one mistake. Just fight the fight that God tells you to fight. And that's it. Let's stand in this place.